What a great day in God's presence. As I was worshiping here, I was just so thankful that I am able to come into God's house and to enjoy his presence. And I can take all the cares that I've been carrying with me and just be surrendered right here in his presence. And I was thinking about this last 1 week, let alone the last, however long, but this last week was a lot. I feel like I've been in a bit of a pressure cooker, and there's things happening in every direction, and I'm trying to figure out how I'm gonna take care of all the things. And there's a saying that people say that God doesn't give you more than you can handle. I've always said I don't believe that. Did I say that right? God doesn't give you more than you can handle? Yeah, all right, I don't always believe that, unless we just say it in a faith way, right? Because here's the thing. We don't always have the right muscle to do the next thing. And so when I was thinking just this morning in the presence of God about all that's going on, I'm just really thankful that God doesn't keep us in a spot where we cannot handle it. But he's here with us. And so if that's you, if you're something like me, as I pray, I want to pray for you before I get started. I just want to pray that God would meet you right where you're at. So if that's you, as I pray, would you just lift your hands to God and just know that he's going to meet you right where you are. Lord Jesus, I just thank you so much. God, that while there might be a challenge in front of us, while it might feel like we're in a pressure cooker, you are with us. God, I thank you that your truths are a solid foundation that we can set our feet on. I thank you that we can turn our eyes up and look to you. We don't have to keep our eyes on our circumstances. I thank you, God, that you have created our bodies in such a way that we can breathe slowly and move intentionally, even though life is busy and fast. Thank you that your presence can come and interrupt our circumstances, and we can fully trust in you. In your name I pray. Amen. All right, well, I have the privilege of being up here and speaking to you today. Pastor Daryl is over at Mill Plain speaking, so that's the first time he's been able to be there in quite a while. And today is a great day. It's the end of our series, the end of our season. And this morning, I get to talk to you about the way of Jesus. The way of Jesus is a way that we can follow in order to live a fruitful life and to impact the world around us. Well, Jesus told us that we were meant to go into all the world and preach the gospel. And I don't know about you, but for me, that feels like not the most easy thing to do. It feels like it's not really in my personality. And there are some people that really make it look easy. They can just talk to people really easily. Now, if you talk to me, I'm going to start talking and never stop. But the problem is the first initial ability to just be comfortable in a space with someone that I don't know and just to be a normal human and have a conversation. That's me. And so this idea of going out and impacting the world feels like how? How am I going to do that? How am I going to impact the world? You see a lot of people impacting the world, or at least I do. I look at social media and think, okay, so I need to have a social media impactful life. I need to maybe be with an influencer, then they can impact the world. Or we could go viral maybe, if that's, up your alley and you want to do that. It's not up mine, but these are things that I look at and think, okay, these people are impacting the world. And then of course, there's some other things too that make a change in our world, like politics or war. When I was thinking about all these young people that are getting baptized, a lot of them were at our youth camp. And every time we go to youth camp, it reminds me of that cult that was out there in Central Oregon. And if you might remember it or have heard the story, like they were trying to impact the world by poisoning people, taking over politics and the government. That's how they were trying to impact the world. So this is the way humanity thinks about impacting the world. But we get to follow the way of Jesus. And so what is the way of Jesus? Jesus' movement has been going for over 2,000 years. It is all around the world. And there is a best-selling book year after year. That's a pretty incredible movement. So how did he do this? Was it by strategy? Was it by hiring some influencers? Like there's any number of things that it could have been. But Jesus impacted the world just by being himself. He was just present in people's lives. The way of Jesus is counterculture to the way of humanity. And so let's look here let's think about some of the things that Jesus said that are counterculture. You've heard it said, love your neighbor. Jesus says, love your enemy. If somebody slaps you up one side of the head, let him slap you up the other as well. I don't know if you remember that exact text, but it was something like that. And then there was Jesus' prayer when he was hanging on the cross, and he said, Father, forgive them, for they don't know what they are doing. This is the way of Jesus. If you remember the story, or when we spoke on Palm Sunday, we talked about the impact that Jesus made as he came into Jerusalem that day. He came into Jerusalem to change the world, and his disciples thought that he was going to do that through upheaval in the political scene. And so that means he could have rode into the city on a war horse, but instead, he came in on a donkey. He came in to offer what he had, which was his peace and his love. Matthew chapter 9, verses 10 to 11. While Jesus was having dinner at Matthew's house, many tax collectors and sinners came and ate with him and his disciples. When the Pharisees saw this, they asked his disciples, "Why does your teacher eat with tax collectors and sinners?" And then Luke chapter 7, verse 34, the Son of Man came eating and drinking, and you say, here's a glutton and a drunkard, a friend of tax collectors and sinners. And then again in Luke, it says, now the tax collectors and sinners were all gathering around to hear Jesus, but the Pharisees and the teachers of the law muttered, this man welcomes sinners and eats with them. You see, the religious people of that day were not pleased with the way Jesus was going about things. Because hospitality in that time was an invitation into your home and was a sign that you honored someone. And so to honor a sinner would feel like the absolutely opposite thing that you would do in that culture. But then Jesus comes along, and where do we find him? With the sinners every single time. He was sharing a meal with the very people that have been cast aside. The other story that this reminds me of is the story of Zacchaeus. If you grew up in church, you know that Zacchaeus he was the chief tax collector. And he was also a wee little man. Yes. So I'm going to actually go to this text here in Luke chapter 19, verses 1 through 10. Jesus entered Jericho and made his way through the town. There was a man there named Zacchaeus. He was the chief tax collector in the region, and he had become very rich. He tried to get a look at Jesus, but he was too short to see over the crowd. So he ran ahead and climbed a sycamore fig tree beside the road, for Jesus was going to pass that way. When Jesus came by, he looked up at Zacchaeus, and he called him by name. Zacchaeus, he said, quick, come down. I must be a guest in your home today. I'm laughing to myself because I'm trying not to break out in song. All right, Zacchaeus quickly climbed down and took Jesus to his house in great excitement and joy. But the people were displeased. He had gone to be the guest of a notorious sinner, they grumbled. Meanwhile, Zacchaeus stood before the Lord and said, I will give half my wealth to the poor, Lord. And if I have cheated people on their taxes, I will give them back 4 times as much. Jesus responded, salvation has come to this home today, for this man has shown himself to be a true son of Abraham. For the Son of Man came to seek and save those who are lost. All right, so let's think about this story here and all the details. I find the more details I can get about a story, the more interesting it is. So we're thinking about Jesus. He's walking in a crowd, and this was significant because of how Zacchaeus is going to respond. In this culture, it was a culture of hospitality, and so if there was a person of significance, you wanted them to come to your house because that would be like a badge of honor for you. And so this whole crowd is probably reaching out to him, trying to get his attention. Maybe they're inviting him to their house. Then there's Zacchaeus, and he was this chief tax collector. So what that meant is he had a little bit of like a really bad or corrupt MLM, because he had tax collectors underneath him that he would send out to collect taxes. So he was very wealthy. He got wealthy by basically stealing money from people and getting all of his little minions to steal money from people. And he had the Roman army behind him so that you had to pay these extra taxes. So Rome charged a certain amount of taxes, and then the tax collectors then put their charge on top, and you had to pay it no matter what. So he was the chief tax collector. He was very wealthy. And he heard Jesus was coming to town. And as we know, he was a wee little man. That's correct this time. And so Zacchaeus wanted to see Jesus. But he wasn't able to see him. And it also probably was dangerous for him in this crowd. Imagine this hated person and this big mob of a crowd. It would probably be a really dangerous place for him to be. He wanted to see Jesus. So he ran ahead to climb up a tree. Now, in this culture, this is a culture where lifting up the robe to run would reveal the legs. So this would bring shame. Climbing a tree as a man would bring shame on him. But he said, I want to see Jesus no matter what. So I'm going to run ahead of this crowd, even though I have to lift up my robe and run and show my legs and then climb up the tree. I'm going to see Jesus. That's how much he wanted to see him. So he was an outcast. He ran forward, he climbed a tree. And then Jesus said, when he saw him, to your house we will go. And all these people around were saying, well, you're the person that we came to see. Why would you choose to go to this corrupt man's house? But this is the way of Jesus. Jesus sees people for who they really are. He doesn't see people in whatever circumstance they've found themselves in whatever trouble or trial. No matter who you are and what you have going on in your life, maybe you don't feel like a person who's worthy of Jesus coming to your house. But you are, because Jesus sees beyond and past whatever you are looking at. That's right. That's good. And he wants to come to your house. And all it takes is for you just to show up. Just show up. And Zacchaeus' response, once Jesus came to his house, was a complete change of how he was thinking before. It's like, I can't believe I've encountered this truth, this love. And so I'm going to change the way I'm living, and I'm going to pay back what I've stolen, and I'm going to be a different person now. That is following the way of Jesus. I want you to know that you have the opportunity in your life, no matter who you are, no matter where you live, no matter what you do, you have the opportunity to impact the people around you and their lives can be changed because of Jesus in you. Our problem is that we're often isolated in our own homes. It's just simply the culture of where we live for most of us. We tend to be really busy as well. One of the things that you're not supposed to say when someone says, "How are you?" is busy. But I stopped saying good, and now I'm saying busy, and I'm trying to figure out, okay, what's the next thing to say? But we're all busy. That's a fact. We often have decision fatigue, or we've got so many things coming at us through social media, all these challenges of input constantly that make us feel like, okay, now at the end of the day, I just want to be done and go numb a little bit. That's a challenge to being able to impact the world around us. And then a lot of us are carrying around all kinds of wounds. There are things that are within us that kind of have this hindrance to maybe reaching out to our community the way we think we should. I'm one of these people that feels like, how can I make an impact? Some of the words that were spoken over my life caused me to think that I've got nothing to say. And I apologize if you've ever been in a conversation with me that I talk too long, but it does, but I do believe this. It is really hard for me to feel like that I'm not an interruption in your life, that I have something worthwhile to say. And so for me to think about going to my neighbors or ministering to people around me is a big roadblock, because I have to get past myself and my circumstances. When I was in Portland Bible College, I had an opportunity to go out and do street ministry, and that was really outside my comfort zone. In fact, I came from this tiny town of 500 people, and you might imagine 500 people sort of in one room, but it was 500 people spread out. So I didn't see people that often. So it was quite a thing to go do some street ministry once I came here to Portland Bible College. And I just felt like I was such a bad person because I couldn't really find my groove. I wasn't really bold enough to go talk to people. Now, the team around me, we had lots of great, amazing experiences because I had a team around me and we all went together. But I remember at that time, I sort of put this wall up and I said, oh, this isn't for me. I can't do this. I'm not good enough for this. I don't have anything to say. And I kind of just put this wall up and said, it's not for me. But I will tell you that what I've learned over the years is that we just have to be comfortable in our own skin. We have to be who we are. We all have different personalities. We all have different gifts and talents. And those are the exact things that are needed to impact the people around you. I have to just be who I am. It's even hard to get up here and to speak in front of you because there are so many dynamic, amazing speakers, and I'm not one of those, but I'm me. So I can bring me here and I can share the way I think with you. So our calling is to follow the way of Jesus. We have to get to know Jesus in order to follow his way. We have to understand who he is. And then we become like him. And then we do the things that he did. And then we share our lives with those around us. And as we share our lives with those around us, guess what? That God that we know so well shines through us. That's true. We don't always have to make it happen. Jesus was just himself. As he was walking through that crowd, he was himself. He was just walking along and he had all these pressures around him, and then he sees someone who is desperate and in need. He was an outcast. He was not a good person, and Jesus saw him and said, okay, I'm going to spend time with you today. Follow the way of Jesus is how we impact the world around us. We have to be known for the love of strangers. So the Greek word for hospitality is philoxenia. I'm sure I'm not saying it quite right, but it's the best I can do, all right? So it's a compound word with two parts. The first part, philo, it's a Greek word for love. And then the second part, xenia, is a Greek word meaning the stranger or the foreigner. So hospitality then is literally the love of a stranger. I think that's really amazing to think about, is that we can draw in and be hospitable to strangers. Now, you don't have to bring a stranger into your home, because I think that's a really wise boundary. We've all watched Dateline. Okay, that's not necessarily what I'm asking of you to do. But to see others, maybe who are not in your friend group or who are not like you, we can be hospitable without having to entertain. Entertaining is different than being hospitable. I have to be reminded of that sometimes because I have a really hard time trying to not perform. I'm not a great performer, but inside me, I think I'm not good enough, so I need to try to perform. And then I'm reminded I just have to be hospitable. Come into my house and make yourself at home. Or see someone who needs help and offer a hand. It's really quite simple, the love of the stranger. Then we ask God for help to approach every person and every interaction as spiritual. So Jesus approached all of his interactions with people as spiritual because he knows that we are all eternal beings. What an interesting perspective. I found myself walking through the park with my dogs the other day, and usually when you're in a dog park, people are like super friendly. It's one of my favorite places to go because there are lots of opportunities for connection and conversation. And so I'm walking along as I normally do, and someone comes along, and he was not a nice person. And he was not nice to his dog. He was just not nice. And I walked away and I said, well, that was a not nice person. I'm sure that's the language I used. And I tell you what I didn't do. I wasn't looking at that person that day thinking, oh, that's an eternal person right there that I'm interacting with. I was in that very moment thinking, well, that was not a very nice person. I hope I don't see him again. So we all have challenges sometimes to be hospitable to people around us. All right, so C.S. Lewis said, there are no ordinary people. You have never talked to a mere mortal. Think about that for a second. Matthew 25, verse 40, and the king will say, I tell you the truth, when you did it to one of the least of these, my brothers and sisters, you were doing it to me. Your life, your actions make an impact. Colossians 4, verse 5 and 6, be wise in the way you act towards outsiders. Make the most of every opportunity. Let your conversation be always full of grace, seasoned with salt. Yes, please, don't skip the salt, so that you may know how to answer everyone. And 1 Peter 3, verse 15, always be prepared to give an answer to everyone who asks you, to give the reason for the hope that you have, but do this with gentleness and respect. Listen, you have this already within you. When you know Jesus, when you're living with him, when you're acting like him, when you're following his way, we just need to be like him, full of grace and compassion for people, seeing them through the eyes of eternity, seeing them through the eyes of Jesus, and just being a hospitable, human, kind, showing love to strangers. So the way of Jesus is life at the table. Life at the table is using our homes, workplaces, and everyday lives to invite strangers to become friends and friends to become family. That can happen over time. For some of us, we have a magic thing where we have friends right now. But it's okay if it takes time to meet strangers, and then slowly over time, they become friends. You've had this happen, and then slowly over time, they become family. And just as Jesus invited Zacchaeus to a table that he didn't earn, We've been invited to God's table, despite being broken and undeserving. So the Lord's table is the first table that we're invited to. He invites us in. And because he invites us in, we can receive all that he has for us. Then we can take that and we can give it out to those around us. So have you received God's love and acceptance for you? God's love and God's acceptance. Those aren't always easy for us to say that we know or actually truly believe or can live out. Have you received God's love and acceptance? He has it available to you. Even though you might be undeserving, we all are. Have you received God's love and acceptance? There are lots of tables that we can sit up. There's a neighborhood table that we can show our hospitality in. I have a couple of stories for you, and one you've probably heard from Daryl, but I thought maybe I would share my story about our neighbor Susie. I was a young mom, and we bought this little house. It was a repossession, and it was right by the railroad tracks, and it was on the wrong side of those railroad tracks. And we had just had Mariah. I don't remember how old she was, but she was in a stroller. And Daryl and I had gone out a year after we graduated from Portland Bible College, and we went and started our church from scratch in another town. And I was very wanting to be involved. I wanted to be doing everything with Daryl. I wanted to be involved in starting this church and getting to know all the people and doing all the things. And then I had a baby, and then I was like, oh, my life has taken a turn somewhere. How am I going to be effective for God? Because I now am home, rather than out adventuring in the world where I wanted to be. And we often, because my husband's family grew up on a beef farm, and so did mine, so we were used to having a freezer full of beef. And that was the case at this time. And I was walking up and down my street one day, and I thought, I've got a freezer full of hamburger. So maybe what I'll do is just go around and knock on all the doors and just give people some of what I have, because that's all that I could think to do. And so that's what I did. I filled up the bottom of that stroller with all this frozen ground beef from our freezer, and I started walking down this little street and handing out hamburger to all the neighbors. It was a great way to meet them, by the way, and everyone accepted it gladly. And we got to know our next door neighbor, Susie. Susie was an amazing woman. She was a biker chick. She had never grown up in church, so she was a bit rough. And I was this girl, remember, from this tiny little town. I grew up in the middle of nowhere. I wasn't used to this kind of person. And you know what? Susie became such a great part of our lives. We watched I Love Lucy at her house all the time. I don't know how many seasons of it over and over again it feels like. Susie became a great part of our lives, and we started as strangers, and then we became friends. And like I said, we started watching I Love Lucy together, and she started helping me at the church with some projects that I was working on. And the next thing you know, Susie herself started coming to church, and I'll tell you what, Susie turned her life over to Jesus and surrendered her life to him. And that happened not because I'm a person that can go out onto the street corner and just talk to a stranger. I just took what I had. It was a pound of hamburger, and I gave it to her. And then that stranger became a friend. Trying to understand my notes. There was a guy just a couple of days ago during this heat wave, downtown Camas is where my business is. And there was a guy standing at this table it was something to support children of some kind. And I had to walk by him, and then of course he tried to get me to donate to his cause. I never trust those things, because if I don't know the organization, I don't really know what you're up to. So no, thank you. I said, but hope you stay cool today. He said, I do not do well in the heat, and I have to be here all day. And I just went on with what I had to do. And I just thought about that guy, and I thought, I know what it's like to be too warm and overwhelmed and just feeling like I can't stand it anymore. And I remembered that I had gone to Florida, I guess a year ago, and that was what it was like there, really too warm, and I was having a really hard time. So I went and got one of those spray bottles with the fan on it. And so I just drove home, and I got it, and I got him a cold water from my business, and I just took it to him, and I said, I hope you'll stay cool today. And he couldn't believe it. He was so overwhelmed. This is what hospitality is. I didn't know that person. Excuse me. I didn't have to go and stand in front of him and preach to him. I just took something that was in my hand. I was hospitable. I showed love to a stranger. You can do that too. When all the world was shut down in 2020, it was such a strange period of time. And as many of you know, our daughter has brain cancer. And in 2020, she was going through active treatment with chemotherapy and radiation. And it was quite a time. It was really hard. I wasn't brushing my teeth, I think, for months. I do now, twice a day. I'm a good girl, but I'm just saying, like, it was a really hard time just to put one foot in front of the other. And I had just started my business, and I started my business because I wanted to impact my community. I love being in my community, and I love impacting people. And I spent that year with my head down, just walking slowly, just thinking, okay, just one more day, just one more step. And I kept thinking feeling so guilty, how wrong must I be that I'm not impacting my community yet? That was all the thoughts going on in my head that entire year. I can't believe that I'm so terrible that I can't figure this out. My circumstances are terrible, and I wanted to impact my community, but I can't. And I just must be failing God. That's what I was thinking all that year. And then there's a pub right next door to my business. And because at that time you couldn't go inside, everyone sat outside. And it was really the same 5 people every day. And so I got to know them pretty well. And this older gentleman, one day, he stopped me and he said, "We've been watching you." And I was like, oh goodness, that's kind of scary, because like I said, I'm kind of moping around. And he said, "We've been watching you, and we can't believe what you're doing." And I said, "What do you mean?" And he said, "Well, all that you're going through, and yet every day you come here and you just put one foot in front of the other. We're watching you." And I was able to spend so much time with this little group of people that was kind of displaced from their regular pub. And I got to share the love of Jesus with them as they allowed me to do so in my own way, a little bit over time. But I'm telling you what, those strangers, they became friends. And those friends, they became family. It's hard to believe when I think about my own life, because I just don't feel like I'm good enough to make an impact on my world. And then someone says, "Guess what? We've been watching you." And I was like, oh my goodness. I'm so thankful that I'm connected to Jesus. I'm so thankful that his love is shining through me. Because what he has seen, that's not actually me and how I'm feeling today. He's seen God shine through me. At my business, I have this table. I wanted to make sure that there was opportunity for conversation. And so I purposely put a little dining room table in my business, so when students come in, they can sit down. And we share tears, we share conversations, we share joys, we share heartache. And I love listening to my community. I love seeing these strangers that come into my business, and I've never seen them before. I love seeing them come in and become friends. And I'm really thankful that some of these friends have become family. And I'm also thankful that so many of these people I've had the opportunity to share Jesus. But it wasn't like it was when I put that wall up and I said, "This isn't for me." No, it still isn't for me. But I've learned that I can just be me. I can be me. I'm kind of quirky, I'm kind of nerdy, kind of kooky, but I can be me, and I can impact the world around me. And you can too. You see, Daryl and I see a church that isn't just a professional church where the people on staff impact the world. This isn't a church that's all about strategy, where we have this strategy, okay, we're going to take the city of Portland through this strategy. No, Daryl and I see a church where the strategy to make a difference in Portland and in your neighborhood is you. Whoever you are, whether or not you feel qualified, whether or not you feel like you have the right personality, no matter what's in your hand, you have something in your hand. You can be you. Just show hospitality. Show love of a stranger. Watch those strangers become friends. Watch those friends become family. And watch that family become the family of God. Let me pray for you. Lord Jesus, I just thank you so much. God, that you care for us so much that we just can be who you created us to be. With our feet grounded, our hands open, our eyes looking up. When we're intentional to see through your eyes, God, thank you that you shine through us to impact the world around us. Help us to see the Zacchaeus in our world and make a difference. And I thank you that you would bless each and every person here today in your name. Amen.